Muted.
Marcie Sample with the Washington Student Achievement Council, and this is the Grant 4 Bidders Workshop. Thank you for joining us today. How do I get to the next slide? Christina, thankfully, is here helping me out today with this webinar, and thank you for your patience as we got started. So as I said, my name is Marcie Sample, and my primary responsibility at the Student Achievement Council is managing the federal Gear Up grant. This is our 4th bidder workshop this week. We've been in Lacey, Spokane, and Wenatchee. So hopefully this is well rehearsed for you at this point, but it is a little bit different doing it on a webinar versus in person. So there are a lot of brand new people on the line today. So a little bit about myself. I've been with the council now for 9 years, and this is my second cycle of Gear Up funding that I've been involved in. I came along in 2007 when the state added funding to expand Gear Up to 25 schools. And so, as I said, my primary role is to lead the effort. We have several other staff here at the council also to support our efforts. And we do a lot of program resource development and have a great website. So if you haven't looked at our website, it's www.gearup.wa.gov. And whether you decide to apply or a successful bidder or not, there are a lot of free resources there, so I encourage you to look at that. Little shameless plug there. So a little bit about why I do this work. I consider myself a Gear Up kid before there was Gear Up, and I am the child of teen parents. My mom was 16 and my dad was 18 when I was born, and they always had great aspirations for me, just like all parents do for their children, and always told me I would go to college. But they did not have the opportunity to participate in higher education, so they didn't really have the skills or tools or knowledge to help me do that. And so thankfully, in 7th grade, I met my school counselor, who still is my friend and mentor and has also been my employer in the past. And she took me in and made sure that I had all of the information I needed to be able to go on to college. But the second part of that story is that I made really uninformed decisions along the way. And so when I was in 9th grade, I decided that I was going to go to the University of Washington because it was harder to get into than WSU, and that was all of the thought I put into it. And so sure enough, 4 years later, I went off to UW and then proceeded to cry almost every single day of my freshman year because it just was really not a good fit for me. I did stay and I did finish, and then later got my master's degree at Evergreen, and that was a little bit better decision-making process for myself. But I tell you that story because I think Gear Up is a way to help students who were like myself, you know, had goals but didn't have the skills or knowledge to get there or make good decisions. And so I love that in Gear Up we are able to help schools add those human resources in the building and the services needed to really make sure that students and families have all the information to make the best choices for plans after high school. So today we're going to go over a little bit about Gear Up in Washington, and I'll give you some basic overview of Gear Up and the goals and purpose of that, and then we'll spend most of the time going over the RFP requirements, and we will give you an opportunity to ask questions. One really important part of this RFP process is that there is a limited time that you can ask questions. So we are extending it until next Wednesday. So please today, as you have questions, if you could type them in the chat box, and I will pause occasionally and address those questions and make sure at the end that we have covered them. And then after today's webinar, if you have questions, please email them to me. My contact information will be on the last slide. And then after January 18th, we will no longer be able to answer questions related to the RFP, and that is to ensure that everyone has the same information and keep this process as fair as possible. So again, if you have a question, feel free to just jump into that chat box at any time, and we will respond as quickly as we can. Okay, next slide. All right, so Washington State Gear Up, which is our program, is a partnership that involves a lot of people, a lot of players help us do this work. And so the Office of the Governor has appointed the Student Achievement Council as the lead for this grant, and it is a federal grant with some additional state funding that's made available through the legislature and through our agency. Then we partner with the University of Washington currently to help us with our professional development efforts. Our professional development is a big part of what we do. We work with schools to help build the capacity to do this work beyond federal funding, and we think one of the most effective ways we can do that is to make sure that you have well-trained staff. We partner with the College Success Foundation also to provide some professional development, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. We also partner with OSPI for data collection purposes. So we are able to get CEDARS reports from OSPI weekly on all of our Gear Up students to do the required federal reporting. So we receive some basic demographic information. We also receive assessment results and course enrollment and course history. I'm seeing that a lot of people are having audio difficulties, so we're going to just pause for a moment and see if we can get everyone working. So just hold on just a moment, please. Okay, and then you can see the other partners that we have. One of the exciting things we've been doing in this grant cycle is we have joined with 13 states to do a longitudinal study of the impact of Gear Up, and we've been participating in that process since 2012. And ultimately, the results won't be available until 2025, but we have been getting interim reports to see how we're doing, making progress toward our goals, and helping us to better identify the most effective services. So that's been very exciting. And then we work with an external evaluator, RGI Corporation. So Gear Up is an acronym, and it stands for Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs. We talk a lot about how that really doesn't represent the work that we do because we are really wanting to support students in earning a post-secondary credential that has labor market value. And I love that phrase. I completely stole it from someone else, but it really helps clarify that we want to be inclusive in supporting students to be prepared and move on to the post-secondary option of their choosing. So all students should have the opportunity to be prepared for the highest level of post-secondary ed, which would be entering into a 4-year. But if they choose something else through a well-informed process and research and information, then we really believe in supporting them whatever their choice is. We want to include families in that process all along the way. As I shared my story earlier, I'm sure you're familiar with, lots of families in your communities who have dreams of college for their students, but they just don't know how to get them there. So helping families get that information early on is vital. And we do that by providing a lot of direct services primarily tutoring, mentoring, and counseling, but there is a whole range of other options available. We think of Gear Up as being a menu of options that schools can then customize to best meet the needs and fill the gaps that are exist in their schools. The Higher Education Opportunity Act is the federal law that governs what we do in Gear Up. It was updated in 2008. And when it was updated, it did become much more inclusive, even if they didn't change that acronym. So a lot of times when we talk about college here at the Council and in Gear Up, we're really using that as a generic term to mean a post-secondary plan after high school. And post-secondary ed can include anything from an apprenticeship to a to a certificate program, other vocational programs, or 2- or 4-year degree programs. So when we say college, please know that we really are including all of those options when we say that. Our history: in 1999, the Council was then known as the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and we received the first Gear Up grant. That's when it was established. And we have since had 3 successful grants, just wrapping up Grant 3 in 2017. And we hope to have no gap in funding and successfully be awarded by next fall with a new grant, which will be our 4th grant. As I said earlier, in 2007, the state committed funding to expand Gear Up, and many of those schools continue with us today. Some of you may be familiar with the idea that there is the state program, which we are, but also there are partnership programs. Central, University of Washington, WSU, and Highline School District all currently have Gear Up programs as well. The partnership programs operate a little bit differently. They have a little bit different rules and requirements and a little bit different student model, but the goals are all the same. And so currently in the state, 71 school districts have Gear Up, serving 32,500 students, and that represents $38 million in funding. You can skip this one. So the goals of Gear Up, these again come from the U.S. Department of Education, and everything that we do in Gear Up aligns back to these 3 goals. So when you think about what do Gear Up activities look like, how do we spend the funding, it all comes back to, are they helping students and families reach these goals? So it's all about increasing academic performance so that students are ready for post-secondary education, and we consider ready as not needing remedial or developmental courses when they enroll. Those courses are expensive, and they take time away from the student making progress toward that degree attainment, and so we want students to academically be ready for that coursework, which also now means getting a 3 or 4 on the state test. We also work to increase high school graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment rates, and we monitor that closely. Currently, our Gear Up schools are exceeding the statewide graduation rate by about 3 or 4%. We're pretty proud of that. And then, as I said earlier, it's all about making sure students and their families have the information starting very early in 7th grade to know how they get ready. There is research that says that by 7th grade, families have often decided whether or not they can afford college. And if they've decided that, most of the time based on misinformation, then they stop talking to their child about a post-secondary ed, and so they stop that conversation about what courses they should take or how to plan for that. And so Gear Up starts working with students in 7th grade, and we try to mitigate those circumstances. We have several performance measures, some that we are required by the Department of Ed to track and report, and some that are optional that we add in because we think they add value to the experience for our students and better prepare them. So the 2 sources, if you're interested in learning more about that, are the GEPRA, the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993. There are 11 measures that we're required to track. Those are all listed in the RFP on pages 5 and 6, so you do have that detail. And then we've been a partner with National College Access Network. We're a member with them, and we've also participated in a Common Measures learning community to more closely look at what are the measures for access for students. And so we've added in some of those. They also very closely align with the GEPRA performance measures, but some of them are different. And so there are 7 essential indicators that say if students meet these, then they will be ready for post-secondary enrollment. So I encourage you to look at those, but again, they are all referenced in the RFP document. Can you tell up there if they have questions? Just going to pause here for a moment and check to see if we have any questions other than about audio. I think we're good to go. All right. So what do we think makes an effective program? As you saw earlier, we have had Gear Up here in our agency since 1999. We have well-experienced staff and a lot of data to look back on about how and where we've been most successful. And one of the things that we wholeheartedly believe is that schools are most effective when you're working together in collaboration with both planning, what the program will look like, and the implementation. And so we think that collaboration should include district office staff, middle school staff, and high school from the beginning. So you probably, if you've had a chance to review the RFP, you know that we want both the middle school or the building where 7th graders are housed and the high school, or if you have a junior high in there also, that all schools must be involved in planning for the proposal. So we think all levels of staff should also be in that conversation. So administration, teachers and counselors, anyone that serves as an advisor, and support staff. So in Gear Up, we have Gear Up staff who have experiences that range from 20 years as a parapro in the district to a master's in social work. And so we see that that diversity really enriches what we're able to offer, and all of those perspectives really add value to the planning and implementation. Also, we look at Gear Up as an opportunity for continuous improvement, and we think it's important to look at where you are now and set goals as to where you'd like to be at the end of next year and at the end of every year that you're part of Gear Up, and then plan forward based on your progress and where you still have needs. So we talk a lot about continuous improvement. I think one of the things that we're good at is we don't judge based on where you are now. So where you are now is where you are now, and good for you for thinking about how you can bring additional resources into the school so that you can make improvements. And so in the application packet, you've probably seen that there's a rating scale, and I just want to reinforce that that is not scored because we really do believe that it's most important to have an accurate assessment of where you are now and then work on making improvements. We also think it's very important to integrate Gear Up into everything else that you do in the building. So Gear Up is not as effective when it's a set-aside add-on program that's done for the 6 years and then it's gone because the funding leaves. So really think about how you can use Gear Up to enhance what you're already doing, or add new services to complement what you're already doing, and how you can really integrate into existing programs like AVID or after-school programming and your district strategic plan. So really think about how can you make Gear Up part of everything we do. Talked about this just back one. Talked about this just a little bit earlier and our professional development efforts. So think about how you can use Gear Up also to build the capacity in your building to sustain some of the practices. We know there will always be some things that you can't afford to continue beyond Gear Up funding, but how can you use these services to really build the capacity of your staff? So let's talk about eligibility. Who is eligible to apply? I think that everyone on the call has probably looked at their own eligibility already. But the first question is, are you served by another Gear Up program? So if you currently have a partnership Gear Up program through WSU, Central, UW, or Highline School District, you are not eligible to participate in this grant cycle. And the reason that we've chosen to make that one of our eligibility criteria is that there were over 200 schools who were eligible based only on free and reduced lunch rate. And we think it's important to spread the resources around as much as possible. So we feel that if a school already has a partnership program, then you have those resources, and we'd like to reach out to schools that don't have that. So that's the first criteria. Then the lead applicant must be the building that houses 7th graders. So there's just a variety of school configurations about where 7th graders live. So you might be a K-12, you might be a 7-12, or you might be just a middle school 6, 7, 8, or even a junior high 7, 8. I mean, it just goes on and on. So the lead applicant is where the 7th graders live every day. Then you have to have at least one high school partner. And if you are a middle school, junior high, high school configuration, then all 3 of those schools would need to be partners in this proposal. But you have to have at least one high school partner. So if you are a district that has multiple middle schools and or multiple high schools, you should think about where do the majority of the Gear Up students transition to in the later grades and have at least that school as the partner. But it is possible to have multiple middle schools and multiple high schools as part of the application as long as they meet the final criteria, which is that your free and reduced price lunch rate is at least 50%. And the eligibility date that we're looking at is the October 2016 as it was reported to OSPI, and we will both ask you to report that in your application, but then we will also verify that. A question came up earlier this week about what if our rate wasn't 50% in October, but it's 50% now. If you can document that well, then you may still apply under that qualification, and we'll just ask for that verification from you. So we realize eligibility does change over time, and we don't want to exclude anyone who legitimately is at 50% or more. So please go ahead and apply if you feel that you can document that. It looks like we have a question. The question is, we have 3 middle schools that are eligible. Are all 3 middle schools the lead applicant, or do we choose one school? So this has been a common question this week. There are actually several ways that you can look at this. If you have 3 middle schools, you may choose, you don't have to type it all. Yeah, I'll do it later. Sorry, just letting Christina know that I'll answer the questions in writing later as well. So you can choose to do a single application that includes all 3 middle schools as the applicant, and then of course the high schools where they transition to. Now you should do that and can do that if you feel that you can accurately describe your proposal and your proposed activities in a single application. Or you can apply as with 3 separate applications if, for example, they have very different needs and you think that it's better to respond to the questions specific to each school. So it's really your choice and thinking about how can you best present in this application what you want to do in the schools. So sometimes we've had districts where there are multiple middle schools and they all want to use Gear Up in very similar ways, and so they're proposing the same activities, the same level of funding, and it's really easy to present that in a single application. Other times we have schools that have, districts that have 3 middle schools where they want to do very different things, and so it gets a little bit harder to present that in a single application. But it's really about what you're most comfortable with, and we're not going to add or take away points because you decide to do a single application or a separate application. So really just look at the scoring rubric and see if you can reflect all of that in a single application, and that would be acceptable. All right, I think that's all the questions for now. So who is our target population? Gear Up, again, by federal guidance, serves students no later than 7th grade and follows them through high school graduation and or the first year of post-secondary education. So currently we have a 6-year grant, and that's exactly what we've done. We've started with 7th graders and we followed them through high school graduation. In our next grant cycle, we will be applying for a 7-year grant, and that means that we will start with students in 7th grade and then we will follow them through their first year of post-secondary education. So we offer 2 models, and this part can be a little bit confusing, so please let me know if I'm not covering it enough and ask questions, and then also the full description is in the RFP on pages 7 and 8. So the cohort model is probably the simplest to understand. We will start with students next year in 7th grade, and that will be the class of 2023. And we will work with those students in 7th grade, and then we will transition with them to 8th grade, and then to 9th grade, and so on until they're 12th graders. So Gear Up, the program, the Gear Up staff, and the funding follows that single class of 2023 all the way through those 6 years. The priority model is a little bit different. Those are typically very small schools that are either K-12 or 7-12 buildings. And so to serve a cohort of students kind of gets silly, because sometimes that cohort might be 4 students or even 30 students. And so we're serving very small numbers if we chose to do a cohort model. So we offer the priority model, where we work with 7th through 12th grade students every year of the 6th grade grant, but 6-year grant, but only those students who are Gear Up eligible. And in this case, Gear Up eligible means that those students are on free and reduced price lunch, or they're homeless or in foster care, live with grandparents, or the family receives TANF or Social Security benefits, or if the student is otherwise disconnected. And so we have an eligibility verification process where schools submit to us their priority model eligible students, and then we flag those students as participating in Gear Up. And you can add, in both cases, you can add students as they move into the district and meet the qualifications. So as I said, the cohort model is appropriate for schools that are the traditional middle school, junior high, high school configuration in separate buildings. The priority model is meant for those small schools that are pre-K or K-12 buildings or 7-12 buildings. And so, again, that full description is on pages 7 and 8 in the RFP, and you will identify in your application which model you'd like to apply for. This slide is really just about thinking about all those transition points and who you need to involve. So I feel like I've covered that already. Again, just emphasizing that all the players need to be involved in this application process. So how is this funding going to work? I think that you probably know that currently we don't have Grant 4 funding. So we are in the process right now. We've released the RFP to select our school partners for the next cycle. We've opted to do that because we believe that by having you identified when we submit our own application, it will make us a stronger applicant because we will be able to base our programming on the actual needs of the schools we plan to serve. So we will have schools selected by the end of March. Then we will make our own application to the Department of Ed. We don't know when that application will be released. We don't know when it will be due, and we don't know when it will be funded. But everyone that we work with at the federal level says it will happen, that competition will occur. And last time there was a competition was 2014, and it happened in June and July, and then funding awards were made by September. So that's fairly typical, So you're going to apply now. We're going to select you by March, and then it's a kind of sit and wait and see what happens. We feel pretty confident in our preparation for a proposal. We have a long history of being successful, and we think we're in a good position to have a strong application again. So as confident as you can be in a competitive world, we are that confident. And then once we're funded, we will have a process of negotiating contracts, negotiating work plans and funding, and then having a kickoff event and providing training so we can get started as quickly as possible. All right, so in your proposals, again, talking about how you can involve the leaders from all schools, and we say leaders, we don't just mean administrators, but who are those key folks that should also be part of this conversation. And there are 4 parts to the application. The first is the self-assessment and planning tool, and you should complete it first. It will help you do the rest of the process, and it's found in Exhibit F. Then there's the proposal narrative, and that's simply the questions and your responses to them. And then the position descriptions that you'll develop. And then finally a form that requires a superintendent's signature called certifications and assurances. So we're going to go over each of those in detail now. I have a question before I do that. Is there a cut of number of students to qualify for the priority model? Cutoff for the number of, I'm sorry, let me say that one more time. Is there a cutoff for the number of students to qualify as a priority model school? No, we are not basing that on a number of students. That's probably a previous grantee who remembers that that's how we did it last time. There were some problems with that plan. So we decided this time it would simply be if you are a K-12 or a 7-12 building, regardless of your size, that makes you eligible to apply to be a priority model school. And a second question, if you are a small school district and have separate buildings for middle and high school, can you still apply for a priority model? That question has come up a few times this week, and I think that's something that we would have to just look at by looking at, small school district means a lot of different things to a lot of people. So if the person that wrote that question, if you could maybe email me separately and let's have a chat about that, and I can help give you some guidance about what makes the most sense. So if you could please do that, that would be great. I can't see who asked the question. Oh, yes, I can. So Tricia, I will follow up with you on that. Will you write me a note? Thanks. So thank you for asking that. So now let's talk about the 4 parts of the application. All right, so you probably noticed first that if you received the RFP, you also received an application. So the RFP came to you as a PDF, we did it that way so that you had the whole packet of instructions in one single document. So everything is in that RFP PDF. But then we wanted you to have a fillable document to submit the application in an easier way rather than breaking up that large document. So we also created a Word document called the application packet. So it requires all of the parts and all of the instructions, but you'll still need to refer to that big RFP document to make sure you hit all the necessary parts. So use the application, the Word document, as your application for the proposal. I'm going to pause again. We have a couple of questions. Do you apply every year to include new cohorts like the class of 2024? No. Once you are funded as a grantee with us, you will stay with us for 6 years, and we don't have concurrent grants like the partnership grants can, so we will only be able to serve that class of 2023 if you are a cohort model, and we'll stay with you for 6 years to do that. but there's no second application to add a cohort. And yes, Todd, I will follow up with you also. Thank you. I think that covers it. Okay, so let's talk about those proposal sections. The self-assessment and planning tool, and you'll hear this from me several times in this presentation, the most important part of submitting your application is to make sure you are following all of the directions. I know that that RFP document is huge, all 67 pages of it, but I really wanted to make sure you had as much information as possible to help you with this process. So there are a lot of directions, and I encourage you to read through them before you start, read through them as you're doing the proposal, and then read through them at the end again to make sure you've hit all the required points. Then a lot of the application is in a table format, and so as a reminder, if there is a blank space, that's because something belongs there. So you shouldn't end up with any blank spaces in your application when it is complete. Because it is in a table format, I'm certain that there are not enough lines there for you to adequately respond to most of the questions. So if you need to add lines, feel free to add lines as much as you need to in order to give us complete answers. Please don't put more than one answer in a single line. It's better if you can keep them separate and distinct by adding those lines. If you're not familiar with tables and how to do that, please ask someone who does know so that you don't change the format of the document. The boxes in the tables should all be set to expand with the content. We tried really hard to verify that and make sure they all worked, but if for some reason they don't, that is the one place you can reformat so that the content will fit in the boxes that we have. As you're filling out the self-assessment and planning tool, it is important to include all the buildings included in the proposal in that conversation so you can complete it, and it's 3 parts. The part 1, I'm sorry, isn't on the slide, is that rating scale that I referenced earlier, where we have some indicators that we want you to think about. Where are you? Are you just starting, or do you have it down and you're just making it a little better every year? You will not be scored based on your answers in that rating scale. We just want it to be an honest reflection of where you are now. And so please don't worry about, if you're at non-use for all of them, that's not going to hurt your application. It's just a little bit more evidence that maybe you need this program and are just getting started. But wherever you are is wherever you are. So just be honest and let us know. In part 2 of the self-assessment tables, under each recommendation, there are 5 of them. We want to know what your current programs are that are helping support those recommendations and what are the resources that you have for all of the buildings included in the proposal. And then in part 3, that's where you're going to tell us what you want to do with Gear Up. And for the purposes of this form, we only want to know what you hope to accomplish in year 1. So what are the activities or services or resources that you want to provide in year 1 to your 7th graders if you're a cohort model, if you're a priority model, to all grade levels and students who are Gear Up eligible for year 1. Then there's a place to tell us how you will spend money and what you will spend money on. And I think that's in the next slide. We'll go over budget a little bit more. So the budget is part of the self-assessment and planning tool. They are just estimates at this point. So in the RFP, we gave you an amount to budget to for this purpose, but as we said earlier, we don't have funding secured at this time, so that is our best guess based on what we hope to receive from the federal government for this program. Those budget figures could be adjusted when we get to fall and have an exact award. So for now, they're estimates. Go ahead and tell us how you're going to spend that money and what you hope to do with that money. And don't forget to include Gear Up staff time so that you're meeting at least the minimum FTE required for you. So again, on pages 8 and 9 in the RFP, there's a table, and I apologize, it split the pages. So the header doesn't carry over to the second page. But make sure you're looking at what the minimum FTE is for your school and that you're meeting that, and that's included in the self-assessment and planning tool budget section. You can always ask to fund more FTE than that minimum, but you cannot ask for less. And the minimum for all schools is 0.5, and then it grows as your student numbers grow. And that's based on a 1 Gear Up staff person for every 200 students, and we use that ratio unless you're small, and then we think the least you can get by with is a half of an FTE to do this work. So please look at that table, make sure you know the FTE, make sure you know your budget amount. I like details, so this is a place that's important to know your audience. I really want to know what you're going to spend money on in details, and I think we've given you some good information in the application to help you with that. We've given you Exhibit E for some suggested allowable costs to help you understand how you can spend this money. However, it really comes back to what is your work plan, what are your goals, and what do you need in order to fully implement that. So your application will you won't lose points if you propose something that's not allowable. That will be part of the negotiation that we do next fall when we do your contract. So go ahead and put what you think you need in there. It should be reasonable. You know, what would a reasonable person expect to spend, and it should be based on the best estimates you can get at this time. But we know that there's always a negotiation process for the contracts in that area. The RFP talks a little bit about match. So for the Federal Gear Up program, for every dollar that we receive in federal funding, we're required to match that either with cash or in-kind contributions, dollar for dollar. So if we get $3.5 million, then we are expected to come up with $3.5 million in match. So 75% of that requirement is passed on to schools for this next grant cycle. And my best advice at this point is don't be afraid of match. When I came on in 2007, I had schools that decided not to apply because they were so worried about whether or not they'd be able to meet that match requirement. And I will tell you, we very, very rarely have a school struggle to meet match. They're able to do that. Most schools exceed the match requirement, so much so that currently our match is at 33% for our current grantees because they've done such a great job matching over the last 5 years. So you don't have to do anything related to match for this proposal. So you don't need to worry about it at this time. And then if you are funded, we will provide a lot of training and support both as we get started and throughout the program to make sure that you meet the match. I have a request to repeat the district match requirement information. So school districts will be required to contribute 75% match for the program right now each year. But again, if we are able to meet our match earlier, then that figure would be adjusted over the grant cycle. So what that means is for every dollar of Gear Up funding that you spend, you will be required to identify 75 cents of match. And match can come from a variety of places. Anything that supports Gear Up implementation and goals, it may be considered match. Administrator time spent on the grant is always match. Counselor time is sometimes match. It depends how your counselors are classified and what they're doing. It can be a little bit harder to get counselor time match just because of the nature of the job. Teacher time spent beyond the contract day, for example, if they're helping beyond the contract day with tutoring or mentoring, or if they're home on the weekend developing more rigorous curriculum because they want Gear Up students to be more academically prepared beyond high school. Volunteers that might be guest speakers or presenters in your building, and other donated goods and services. So again, we will provide a lot of training around match. Please don't let it scare you away. It will be okay, I promise. So in the narrative, again, follow the directions. Each section has a group of questions. You want to be sure that you're answering all of those questions for each section in the right section of the proposal. There are boxes in that application packet that will expand to fit your responses. However, what I suggest you do, because there's a 12-page limit, is that you do all of your narrative responses in a separate Word document and then copy and paste them into the proposal packet to be sure you're meeting that page requirement limit. In the narrative, we want you to address all of the questions from the perspective of 7th through 12th grade for all of the schools involved in the project, and make sure you're including them in that conversation and planning. So it's all schools, grades 7 through 12, responding to the questions together so that we get a picture of what the project would look like over the next 6 years. The certifications and assurances form is just some legal things that we're required to have you sign off on as part of a state RFP process. I don't think there's anything alarming in there at all. Probably the trickiest part is just how do you get it signed and get it back into the application process. So you want to print it out, have your superintendent sign it and date it. Then you're going to scan it back in so that you can email me a signed form with your application packet, and then you're going to mail that original with your hard copies that you're going to send in, and we'll talk about submission in just a minute. So that's just a form that needs to be signed. Position descriptions. We have given you this giant exhibit of all of the possible activities that Gear Up staff could help provide in your district. It also includes all of the things that are absolutely required of Gear Up staff. So please review that exhibit carefully. We developed our job description, our sample job descriptions, somewhat based on OSPI's graduation coach descriptions. And actually, when OSPI developed those, Gear Up was involved in that process. So we kind of had ours, and then OSPI developed theirs, and now we're kind of back to combining them because we think it really accurately reflects how Gear Up folks should be spending their time. So keep in mind that in Gear Up, not just with staffing, but with all spending, supplanting is prohibited. And supplanting means you've been paying for something or someone with a district funding source, and now you're just going to use Gear Up funding for that purpose. That's supplanting, and it's illegal. Please don't do that. It gets us all in trouble. So your positions are new positions in the district. They're funded by Gear Up. They should have new position descriptions, and they should not have been funded in the past. Again, please review those minimum requirements for FTE and the required and recommended qualifications that we've included. As I said earlier, there's a variety of folks that have provided Gear Up services, and they've all done a great job. We've been really blessed to work with some great people over the years. And so we think that those qualifications are based on the experience that we've had in who does the best job in Gear Up. You want to be sure that the proposed activities that you've done in the self-assessment and planning tool are reflected in that position description, so there is good alignment there. Then sometimes people ask if current staff can take on some of the Gear Up work. So that is allowable. There's nothing that says you can't do that as long as we're not doing that supplanting piece. But I just want to give you some caution about that. So I know that Gear Up can be extremely difficult to implement when you take the Gear Up roles and responsibilities and add them on to someone who already has a full-time job. Gear Up is a lot of work. We have a lot of documentation that's required. Our reimbursement process takes some time for a person to do. It's significant for some folks. And so adding it on to maybe, say, an existing teacher who already has a full-time schedule kind of sets you up for failure. So I really want to encourage you to think about how you can create these new positions that are really fully supported by Gear Up, and so that the folks are available during the day to work with students. It's really important that you start now working with your HR department, letting them know you're applying for this funding and that you'll have new positions, because you need to create that position description with their support and permission. You should not, however, post those positions until you have confirmation from us that you have funding. Every district has different kind of contracts. Some districts call this a certificated position, some call it a classified position. Some fund them a year at a time because it's grant funding. Some say it's a position, permanent position, so it really varies district to district. So please include them in that conversation as you're developing your own descriptions. Then when you submit them in the application, they should be in the format that they will be in when they'll be posted to the district. So it should include how many hours a day, how many contract days, etc. All of that should be detailed in the position description. Summer activities are completely allowable in Gear Up, and so keep that in mind. If you are proposing some summer activities, you'll want to be sure that your Gear Up staff have some days in the summer to help support those efforts. Similarly, if you're going to propose more than a 180-day contract for your Gear Up staff, we need to see that they are doing work in the summer. All of our Gear Up staff do have some responsibilities in the summer beyond that 180-day contract time. So we recommend that the minimum that a Gear Up staff member work is 185 to 190 days. That seems to work for most, even if there are no summer programs. It depends on your school size. So a really small school, probably 185 days is fine. Bigger schools, I would recommend at least 190. All right, going to pause for a couple of questions. Would the current Gear Up staff need to reapply for the new grant positions? So that is determined by your school district. Since all of the staff are school district employees and not council employees, your school district can best answer that question. We'd love to see the continuity. Of course, we'd love people with the experience to follow us into the next grant cycle, but we don't get to decide that. So please ask your district office how that will happen. Maybe start with your building administrator. The second question, how do we frame that the new Gear Up positions will be continuations of current Gear Up positions, although in new locations? I think that's a similar question to the last one. So again, that is up to your district to determine. So if you want those folks to continue, there will be the potential for a little bit of a lag in funding. So all of our current Gear Up contracts end August 31st. If we don't receive notification of the new grant cycle by August 31st, there could be a lag in our ability to support those positions. So that's something to consider. So please work with your district office on that issue. Next question, could you further describe the summer work component? All right, so there are a variety of services that may occur over the summer. They might include your own district efforts to provide summer school for academic enrichment or credit retrieval. They might include helping make sure students get to college campuses for camp experiences. We have offered our own summer camps, so we always have the need for chaperones for those students. And then in addition to those student-focused services, we have our own activities in Gear Up. So the billing cycle still occurs in those summer months, so making sure the reimbursement process is done, making sure data collection and reporting is completed, and then we usually have a summer workshop almost always in August for 2 days, and so there's staff time there that is required. So you want to be sure that your position descriptions have an adequate number of days in them so that staff can participate in that. Similarly, if you are proposing, say, a 220-day contract for your staff, then we would want to know what are they doing for those extra days. So we should see in both the position description and in your proposed activities in the self-assessment and planning tool that there are, in fact, summer days that require that number of days from your staff. So looking for alignment in number of days and activities required to implement Gear Up. So submitting the application, again, follow all the directions, triple check them. As someone who's been a grant writer for a while now, I took a huge, like 5-day class on from the Grantsmanship Institute on grant writing, and I'll tell you, like, the primary thing is making sure you follow all the directions. So triple check all of that at least. If you have not already done so, you need to go to our website. Again, that's www.gearup.wa.gov, and in the About section, complete the interest form if you have not already done so. The majority of you on this call have done that. However, there are a couple of you that have not yet completed an interest form. We just need one per school district to let us know who's going to apply. That has to be done by today. If you're not sure, I'll be back at my desk after this webinar. You can send me an email and ask me if I have an interest form for you, and I can let you know. But everyone must submit that by today. After January 18th, please check again our website in the About section for both the Q&A from the bidders workshops and the recording of today's webinar. If I can get the webinar up sooner, we'll certainly do that, but the Q&A won't be posted until Wednesday. So throughout the week, we have collected all of the questions from now all 4 bidders workshops. All of those questions will be put in writing with my responses. So there, I will tell you, we've had probably 50 questions or more this week, clarifying what's in the RFP or giving us different scenarios to think about. So I encourage you, before you start your proposal, to make sure you're going through all of that Q&A. It's some great information. Then in the RFP packet, I believe it's Exhibit G. It's the very last exhibit. We've given you the scoring rubric that we will use to evaluate all of the proposals. So you can actually sit down and look at, you know, am I doing a good job here? How would I score my own proposal? Or maybe giving it to someone else in the district and having them score it and see how you're doing. So we meant that, again, we want this to be fair and we want to be as helpful as possible. We want you all to be successful. So hopefully that will be helpful. The proposals are due to us both in hard copy form and electronic form on Friday, February 24th at 5 o'clock Olympia time. Our office, if you need to hand deliver, is open until 5 o'clock on that day, so someone will be here. When you mail the application packet, absolutely critical that it's here by 5 o'clock. We get mail at 10 o'clock in the morning. So, and because it goes through a campus mail system, it can sometimes take a couple of days. So I would recommend that you send it FedEx with, you know, depending on when you're sending it, with a 1-day delivery or 2-day delivery to be sure it is here on time. Late proposals will not be accepted at all. Then that one electronic copy comes to me, so that's going to be that Word document and the certification and assurances and your position descriptions all in a single email to me at that email address. Any questions about submitting it? I think we cover that pretty thoroughly in the RFP as well. Okay. A little word to those of you who are our current grantees. You cannot use current Gear Up funding, which is your Grant 3 funding, in any way to support the development of this proposal. So obviously none of you traveled to this bidders workshop today, I don't think, because you all called in. You also cannot use Grant 3 funding to pay staff when they're working on this proposal, and you can't use Grant 3 funding to cover any of the costs associated with it, so printing or postage or bringing staff together, whatever it might be. Now, current Gear Up staff absolutely can help you with this process, but they can't do so on Gear Up paid time. So if you're going to pay them, that would have to come from other district funds, or you'd be asking them to volunteer. Similarly, none of that can be used as match either. So it's not eligible for funding, therefore it's not eligible match, and it's also not eligible match for Grant 4 because we don't have a Grant 4 yet. So please use caution with that. Those are federal rules, those are not our rules, and we would all be in audit trouble if that happens. So why should you apply? Again, we have lots of people new to the Gear Up world on the call today, and one of the sad things about doing this as a webinar instead of in person is you don't get to chat with folks about how they feel. You just get to hear from me. But these are some of the reasons that we think this is a valuable opportunity. We have a great Gear Up team here. As I said earlier, we have a lot of years of experience doing this. We have Beth Kelly, who develops program resources and helps lead our professional development efforts. We have Catherine Kirsten, who's our communications specialist, and she makes sure our website is ready and also creates a lot of resources for you to use so that you don't have to do that, and does our social media outreach. We have Kelly Keeney, who helps with data collection and event coordination. I'm tired of talking. And then we have Lori Bonney, who helps make sure all of our fiscal requirements are met and does our reimbursement process. Then we also partner with the College Bound Scholarship Program and the 12th Year Campaign. So Christina is here today from 12th Year Campaign helping me. That is all about college application support and FAFSA completion and WASFA completion as well, and the FAFSA completion initiative, which allows you to get online and see which of your students have completed a FAFSA and which have not, and then be able to intervene and help them. And then with College Bound Scholarship, we have a lot of support to help make sure sign-ups go well and then that students have the information they need to access the scholarship when they go on to post-secondary ed. Our resources are rich. We have so much to offer you, and again, if you haven't looked at our website, get on there and steal some of our stuff. I think one of the most exciting things we've done that's actually been shared by OSPI now is we have a monthly newsletter for students and families that you can customize and add your own information to, and we have one for every month from 7th grade to 12th grade that's customized for grade level. So for September, we have one for 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and so on for every year. So that's really exciting and very popular download for us. We can enhance both what you're doing and help you create new things. So I think all schools at this point are working on career and college readiness, and it's a big topic across the state, and we have statewide goals for degree attainment, and we're all working toward those goals. So Gear Up fits well with what you're already doing and can enhance that process. We can also help you build a comprehensive counseling program. We are a big fan of advisory, and I'll say when I first started in 2007, everyone did advisory, and people have had to move away from that for various reasons. We still are strong proponents of advisory programs and can help support you in bringing those back into your building if you've had to let that go or just want to get it started. We can bring those human resources into your building to provide more direct services to students and families. and help really support your efforts in building a college-going culture, not just in your school, but throughout your community. One of the things that we have done is help build community partnerships. So who are the other people around that want to help with this work? And I know White Pass is on the call today. They've been one of my favorite stories I've been sharing this week about how they've engaged their local fire department in doing family events. And you know, a few years ago, who would have thought that the fire department would be involved with Gear Up? But there they are, not only offering space, but really getting involved in providing those services. And it's been really exciting to see, especially in such a rural community. Then expanding your professional development opportunities. I know pro-dev funds are always limited in districts, and we can offer so much in that area. We do a regional conference every October called Gear Up West, where you can bring not only your Gear Up staff, but your administration and teachers and counselors, whoever you'd like to bring. We fully fund that. And we have excellent keynote speakers, a pre-conference session, and then about 60 breakout sessions. A really strong partnership with 13 or so states to put that on every year, and we get about 500 to 600 attendees. Then in addition to that, we usually have a late winter, early spring 2-day workshop, which is more skill building opportunity for not only our Gear Up staff, but also other folks from your building who can attend. And then we do the kickoff event in August. In addition, we've been able to offer a week-long, we call it Summer EDI, that's been focused on things like Common Core, Next-Gen Science Standards, resiliency, leadership, college admissions, all kinds of topics as we move through the grades and think about what our staff need. And so all of those opportunities, again, are not just available to Gear Up staff, but they're available to other folks in your building. Last year, we started a partnership with College Success Foundation to offer what's called the Go Alliance Academy. And those are online courses that we've been able to offer. We've also paid a stipend to folks for completing it, and they get certificates for participating. We also have college credit and clock hours, not only for Go Alliance, but we always offer clock hours for all of our ProDev events. And so those modules through Go Alliance have been available and have been very successful, again, in building capacity, but in an online format. So what are the results? We have a lot of data, as I said earlier, that we could share today, but I wanted to just highlight some things from that shows how Gear Up can be effective and kind of the range of things that we can do. So typically, Gear Up partner schools have the highest college-bound scholarship sign-up rates. It's been that way since we started. It's always something we're really proud of because our schools are doing such a great job there. In this last grant cycle, we helped establish AVID in 11 school districts. At this point, those programs are sustainable by the districts as we've weaned that funding over time, but we did help them get started. We've offered 9 summer camps over the last few years at various campuses, and those have both been college experience focused and leadership camp opportunities for our students. Our FAFSA completion rate exceeded the state rate for last year. Really proud of those efforts. We've also increased the number of teachers trained in AP and increased the number of AP course offerings. We also support AP test fees for students. I just talked about the Go Alliance Academy. And then last year alone, we provided almost 170,000 hours of direct service to students and families. Consistently, we hear from students and families that they want to pursue post-secondary ed, and always our rates are over 90%. They're usually about 93 to 95% of students say, yes, I want to go on to post-secondary ed. Our families say, yes, this is what we want for our child. But then what does that look like when they show up at the district and when they show up at school every day? Sometimes students don't seem to be motivated, or they seem to not care, or families aren't necessarily looking like they're engaged. And how we see that is they really don't know how. And again, that goes back to my own story. My parents wanted this for me. I'm just like your parents wanted it for you. but they don't always have that skill or that experience. And so the beauty of Gear Up is that we can really help them reach their goals. And it's such exciting work, and it feels so good, and we have so many stories about the impact that we've had that it's just a great place to be. The quote at the bottom, you've probably seen it in my signature line. It's my favorite quote ever. I haven't found one that I like better yet. It's been there for a couple of years. But hope is a stronger predictor of college success than GPA or SAT. And Gear Up is a way to really support students in having that hope, but then also giving them the tools and resources that they need to reach those goals. And so if you really want to be involved in Gear Up, I think the services are great, the impact is great, but it's really that feel-good stuff about helping students and families along the way. So with that, we'll pause and leave it open to any questions. And this, as we said, was recorded, and so we will post it as soon as possible to our website, and the Q&A will be posted on the 18th.